Sneaky Yelan will backstab your enemies, and today I'm gonna tell you how to build her best. My name is Juice and let's get into it. What artifacts does Yelan prefer in order to carry out her special operations? None other than 4-piece Emblem of Severed Fate. The main meat of Yelan's damage is within that burst of hers, which emblem boosts up wonderfully. And since Yelan has quite chunky ER requirements, the 2-piece's provision of 20% DR is highly appreciated, alongside the fact that the 4-piece will buff up Yelan by a very large amount thanks to all that ER you want on her. I don't love 4-piece Nymph's Dream on Yelan, because attack percent is worthless for her. She has 0 relevant attack percent scalings in her kit, but the hydro damage bonus is there I suppose, so I'm mentioning it for the one guy who would have been upset if I didn't put it here. Don't farm deliberately for it. 2-piece mix and match sets are simple. Use 2-piece HP percent, hydro percent, and ER percent. Any mix of them will do you just fine. Main stats are simple. If you have a lot of ER through other sources, go for HP percent, hydro percent, crit percent. But if you need more ER, then don't feel bad going for ER percent, hydro percent, crit percent. And if you have an Aqua Simulacra and are overflowing in crit stats, as in like really good crit stats, well, lucky you first of all, and second off, go for ER percent, hydro percent, HP percent. I'm assuming there isn't much room for ER with all those nastily good crit rolls, so we're gonna go with an ER percent Sans as the example, but if you somehow have enough with all of that, first of all, I know what you are, and second off, then yeah, an HP percent Sans is fine. And yes, an HP percent Goblet with very good substats is super competitive with a hydro percent Goblet. Go for whatever suits your specific situation. Substat priorities are simple. Go for this. If you're playing Vape Yelan, then you can throw some EM into that mix, otherwise it's not that important, and attack is very useless on Yelan, so ignore it entirely. Bursting off cooldown isn't just a little important on Yelan. Dude, it comprises her whole gimmick. So try not to get too caught up in optimizing Yelan's DPS without paying attention to your ER as well. I know it's fun optimizing such a good sub DPS, but with that being said, you still want her to be effective across multiple rotations after all. Emblem is still Yelan's best set to this day in my opinion. It's literally strong boxable now too, so what are you waiting for? It plays best to your amazing flexibility and high ER needs, and I'd skip out on Nymph's Dream if I were you. Spies need a wide variety of tools to carry out their operations. What are Yelan's gadgets of choice? Aqua Simulacra is certainly her favorite, and it's mine too, since even outside of being Yelan's best weapon, this thing is just nuts on the whole. Ridiculous crit damage percent stick, and it doesn't increase her damage metaphorically or poetically or theoretically, it buffs it by 20% at R1. Straight up. The 20% HP provision is also quite wild. What more can I say? This thing just jacks Yelan chock full of everything she could ever want. Minus ER, which is Simulacra's main flaw. You'll have to make sure you have enough of that in substats. Next up I want to discuss Favonius, which may seem silly, but hear me out. Team-wide white energy particles. Lots of ER for Yelan, which is great synergy with 4-piece Emblem of Severed Fate, so it's actually more offensive than you think, and it absolves Yelan's ER requirements completely. Great budget option, don't sleep on it. Sacrificial also works. You can pretend like you have C1, but otherwise the white energy particles of Favonius make it a lot more valuable than Sacrificial in my opinion. Slingshot is also a very cheap free-to-play option that's unironically really good for Yelan's DPS. This is because Yelan has no need for attack whatsoever, so it doesn't matter that the base attack is poor. The recurve bow works as well since it has an HP percent substat, but it doesn't offer many more qualities outside of that. Fading Twilight was the event bow that came out during Yelan's initial release. The ER percent main stat is good, and the passive is simple and easy to trigger over time. Don't mind the yap of it too much, just know that once every 7 seconds, your Yelan will do more damage until the passive maxes itself out. Stringless is also nice thanks to the skill and burst damage, and the EM substat is good if you ever play Vape Yelan. Elegy for the End is also fantastic, like genuinely amazing on a support Yelan, a ton of ER for her, and a bunch of team-wide buffs. Elegy on Yelan is especially nice in teams where you play with Arlecchino and Hu Tao. Fantastic, and I'd say that this is indeed a weapon worth pulling specifically for her. Silver Shower Heartstrings gives you a crap ton of HP, both in its main stats and substats, so if you lost Farina's weapon to this, it honestly works pretty well on Yelan. Moon's Moon works really well for Yelan. Don't level it, leave it at level 1, because the attack percent and base attack don't matter. What matters more is the refinements. With that being said, Moon's Moon is very rare and not a lot of people will have it, so great if you have it, but otherwise don't sweat pulling for it. The two Battle Pass options are fine for their crit sticks, otherwise they're both nothing special. At least Scion for the Blazing Sun has a cool name and also looks cool. You know what? So does Viridescent Hunt. I like that word. Viridescent. All other 5-star weapons and something like Blackcliff are fine for their crit sticks, otherwise I have nothing more to add about them because that's all they have going for them. Yelan has plenty of amazing choices, all with varying degrees of accessibility and usability, so you should more than likely be able to find an effective Yelan weapon on your account. So, who is willing to join Yelan on her next mission? Literally everyone? We're gonna be here all day if I go over every single team that Yelan can work in, because then we'd be talking about 90% of the teams in this game. So instead I'm gonna discuss team archetypes and then give a team example of each differing Yelan archetype at the end of this whole fiasco. We on the same page? Yes? Then let's go. Double Hydro is a fantastic team core that can be driven by many different kinds of units. The strongest variant would be Yelan paired with Farina, and you get such a crazy amount of Hydro application when playing this duo, and Farina's damage bonus complements Yelan's on DPS wonderfully, leading to an absolutely insane team core. It's actually pretty good in the current 12-1-2 due to the two Pyrolectors. You can also replace Farina with Xingqiu for traditional double Hydro, which is still really strong, and Xingqiu acts as a great battery for Yelan to reduce her energy recharge requirements, while also offering some defensive qualities. Meanwhile, Yelan goes all in on offense. They complement each other's main playstyles. Common drivers for this team include Hu Tao, Raiden Shogun, and Kokomi. Hypercarry support Yelan is as the name says. You can stick her with basically any carry in the game as long as they can reasonably do normal attacks within their main rotation to trigger her. The gameplay is showing Wanderer as an example right now, but you can pretty much use any DPS ever with her as long as they don't do prolonged charge attacks like Nervi or plunge like Gaming and Diluc, since weaving in Yelan normals is awkward in those cases. Hyperbloom Yelan is also very solid, and while you can play her on any Hyperbloom team known to man, I'm choosing to show Alhaitham gameplay. A really strong sub DPS that offers a lot of damage to the team, and a ramping A4 also helps Alhaitham himself deal more DPS. She'll work in Sino Quick Bloom too, but it is worse than Farina due to the Hydro Archon having a way longer Hydro uptime than Yelan for her multi-wave. Freeze Yelan mostly exists because of Riesli. It will work fine, it is essentially just another double Hydro core, but because it isn't as old as the other ones, I'm separating this into its own archetype. Personally, I don't love playing Yelan with Ayaka, and if you play Yelan in Ganyu, then go to jail, because why are you playing normal attacks Ganyu? Bloom Yelan, while it might sound silly, is actually very effective because it helps Nilou work in single target. A very good team that helps expand Nilou's potential use cases. Vaporized Yelan sounds silly, but she can do quite a lot of DPS here if you're focusing on vaping Yelan's own hits. Pyro application in this team will also never be a problem, since Yelan on her own as a solo Hydra won't apply enough of her element to outpace Xiangling and Kazuha's Pyro Burst Swirl paired together. So rest assured, as long as you have two consistent sources of pyro application within the team, you will indeed be experiencing some nuclear Yelan vapes should you pick this team up. Quote unquote, Farina replacement is just a very general umbrella term for slotting Yelan, where you would normally put a Farina because she's already in use elsewhere and is more needed. You can do this for pretty much every Fontaine character, barring Linny because he doesn't do normals, if you yourself are normal. The example I'm showing here is with Navia. If you think about your main team and whether Yelan would work there or not, the answer will most probably always be yes. Quick side note, Hu Tao very much can vape with only Yelan present, just apply N2C or normal twice and then charge attack combos, as shown on screen now. Now for an example team from each archetype. Hu Tao, Farina, Yelan, Scatter, Skyward! Arlecchino, Yelan, Bennett, Kazuha, Alhaitham, Yelan, Raiden Shogun, Nihida, the Beast. Yelan, Farina, Jean. Important side note, this is more if you want to play Yelan in Freeze because Ryo himself vastly prefers Vape Melt. Nilou, Yelan, Kokomi, Nihida, Yelan, Xiangling, Bennett, Kazuha, Navia, Chiori, Yelan, Bennett. Chances are Yelan does work with your main team. Take a look at the archetype, are normal attacks involved? If yes, then you're good to go. Yet how exactly does this secretive lady cook? Well, Her normals are literally just a few physical strikes, not sure if you expected much else. She does have this breakthrough barb, which you can see is charged up depending on whether Yelan's bracelet is glowing or not, which is a very clear visual cue. Thanks, Hoyo. So it's just a fancy quick charge attack that scales on HP, there's no real need to pay any mind to this unless you're at C6 Yelan. As for her skill, it has a press and a hold. If you press it, it does a small lunge towards nearby enemies, Yelan quickly marks them, and then Hydro explodes them. If you hold it, Yelan dashes very fast and marks enemies, and either when her duration ends or when you press skill again, or let go of her skill if you're on a PC keyboard, each marked enemy gets exploded with Hydro. You can also use this ability to fast travel around the Abyss Arena or even the Overworld. As for her burst, Yelan gains a small dice on the left corner of her, assuming you're facing her back. Whenever she or an ally does normal attacks, the dice will shoot out shots of Hydro. These are essentially coordinated attacks that trigger with normal attack inputs. Normal attack input just means you are clicking your mouse or hitting your normal button in order to do your attack. She has a 1-second interval for those coordinated attacks, and if you use her skill during her burst, then she'll do another extra one. Simple enough kit to understand. Now for Ascension passives. Yelan's A1 gives her an HP increase based on how many different elemental types are in the team. You'll realistically only ever have 2 to 3 stacks of this up at a time if you take a look at all of her good teams. Don't prioritize maxing out this A1 over using a character's best in-slot team. The HP increase for Yelan is not going to cover for that loss. Her A4 is the fabled ramping damage bonus that we all harp on about. You can get up to 50% damage bonus from it, but because the buff is backloaded, it's safer to assume about 25% more damage bonus percent on average. Otherwise, a really neat increase to any of your teams. Farina might make 25 to 50% look small, but friendly reminder, the Kazuha at maximum. You know, full EM buff with perfect ER, which not most people have, is 40%. Kazuhas are more likely to be in the 30% range if we assume they actually built proper ER, so an excellent cherry on top of this already spectacular unit. As for talent priorities, simple. Yelan's burst is the main meat of her kit. Obviously level it up first. It's her entire main source of value after all, and yes, I do consider it worth crowning for those wondering. Don't sleep on her skill damage, it's pretty good, so level it up as well. Just ignore her normals, you're basically never going to use them until C6, in which then, sure, level them up. But pre-C6, there is no point, unless you find the breakthrough barb cool. Did you know that canonically, Yelan gets paid by Ningguang and more dangerous missions to do? Worst job in the world. Might be great for the adrenaline junkie that Yelan is, but she needs to buy some damn groceries and pay her bills, and getting paid in danger isn't gonna help with that. Plus, I'm not convinced about that tea house of hers. I call fraudulence. So whether you want to pay for Yelan's groceries or for her lawyer when she gets put on trial about the tea house, paying for her constellations will contribute to at least one of those goals, if not both. The extra charge is really nice for Simulacra users, since it reduces ER requirements on Yelan thanks to your being able to generate more hydro particles. If you're worried about field time issues, no bother, just tap her skill twice very quickly and you'll be fine. Good quality of life C1 that makes her easier to build. This increases Yelan's hydro application a lot, and also increases Yelan's total DPS on the whole by a really significant margin. Very powerful C2, which is aged like fine wine, and is still worth getting to this day, but get it for the damage, not the hydro application. This is a very significant DPS increase to your burst, which is well worth your time if you're interested in optimizing Yelan's own damage. Unironically, one of the best C4s in the game, namely because we don't have a single dedicated HP buffer yet. Plus, it's also really good for Yelan herself, but stick her in a double hydro team with Farina, or as an emotional support for Nervy, and that stuff's gonna go nasty. You only need Yelan's skill to trigger this buffing, so if a character can't use Yelan's burst, but would indeed appreciate the HP buffing, then they can still use C4 Yelan in their team. Increases Yelan's skill by +3. This might seem small, but once again, don't underestimate the damage it can do, especially now that you've got C4 on hand. This simply turns Yelan into a crazy C6 Hydra DPS, and since all the cons preceding this are so good for her own damage, you can only imagine the absolute behemoth this lineup is. Really amazing C6, still in the top 10 to this day, even after all the Fontaine C6s have been released. But what I will say is that C6 Farina has power crept C6 Yelan, so keep that in mind. With that being said, crazy good C6. Invest however you want. Literally. All of her vertical investment is good. From C1 to C6. If you want what I would do, I'd get C2 first because Simulacra without C1 can feel a little bit oof in terms of ER requirements, and then I'd go for Aqua. Then after that, sure, go for C3 to 6 if you feel like it, but C2 R1 is a perfectly fine and very powerful stopping point. In any case, great vertical investment. Yelan is still incredible to this very day. Well worth your time, pick her up if you don't have her. If we have staple foods as humans, then Yelan is our daily bread, because having her around transforms your gameplay experience, mark my words. One of the best characters in the game, still top 5 meta to this day, and trust me, you will not be disappointed with her, no matter where you are at in the game, or your investment level. Godsend unit! Remember to join my Discord and follow my Twitter. Both those links will be down below in the pinned comment and description. My Ko-Fi will also be in both of those places if you're interested in supporting me. Otherwise, feel free to check out my channel memberships, which have opened up recently. As of posting, you can gain access to some cool emotes, more perks and tiers are coming soon. I stream on Twitch too. Check me out at twitch.tv/JuiceChannelYT if you want to catch me live sometimes, playing Genshin, Wuthering Waves, Honkai Star Rail, and much more other things. Hopefully this video was able to tell you how to get Yelan absolutely crushing her enemies, silently but effectively. This has been Juice, signing out, and considering how hard Yelan works for the Ministry, Ningguang starts to look more and more like somebody who'd pay an exposure. How does Yelan pay her bills?